Hey everyone, welcome to Judging for the Win. I'm Dave and this is my daily ruling. Today we've got another question that was suggested by a viewer. Thanks to Breno Silva for this question. Amy controls Underworld Breach, and her graveyard is Bedlam Reveler and 6 instants. Can she cast Bedlam Reveler for 2 mana, exiling 3 of the instants in her graveyard? So, in order to get a good answer to this question, we're going to go through exactly what happens step by step. First thing that's important to note is that Bedlam Reveler's cost-reducing ability does indeed work, even though we're not casting it using its normal mana cost, but rather its escape cost. It functions exactly the same way, and it'll reduce the mana cost just the same as if you were casting it normally. Now, the other kind of interesting thing that happens in this situation is that we're removing cards that would cause the Bedlam Reveler to cost less in the middle of the process of casting it. So how does that work? Well, if you've been following the channel for a while, you know that there's a series of steps that happens every time you cast a spell. The exact number of steps and what should count as a step or a sub-step or maybe be considered together with or broken out from one or another is something that's really highly variable among the judges, and depending on who you ask, you might get a lot of different answers. But one thing is always the same, which is that figuring out how much a spell costs to cast is always happening before you actually pay those costs. There's a specific spot in the process of casting a spell where the cost gets locked in and cannot change after that point, even if some other stuff happens in the game that makes you think it might want to change. So, applied to this situation, the way it'll work is you move Bedlam Reveler onto the stack, you determine how much it should cost to cast Bedlam Reveler, in this case just 2 red mana, then you actually move to the process of paying the cost to cast that spell. So you'd pay the red mana and also exile the 3 cards from your graveyard. At this point, you might think that it might need to cost 3 more mana. However, because we're past the point where we lock the cost in, it won't. So that's how it will work to cast this spell from your graveyard. Another kind of interesting thing to note about this situation is that Underworld Breach gives all of the cards escapes with a continuous effect. That means that when you discard your hand with Bedlam Reveler's ability, all the cards that you discard and put into your graveyard that way are going to have escape too. Contrast this with something like Past in Flames, which gives everything in your graveyard flashback. It also accomplishes this by a continuous effect. However, because this continuous effect came from a resolving spell rather than a permanent on the battlefield, the set of objects that it is applying to is determined only one time, when that spell resolves. Therefore, if you get any future cards in your graveyard after the Past in Flames resolves, those will not have flashback. This distinction is kind of subtle, and a lot of people get tripped up by it the first time that they encounter it if it's not something that they've really thought about before. So that's all I have for you today. How did you do? Join me again tomorrow for another daily ruling, but until then, I hope you have a great day.